Hi, welcome to the show. We've got professional angler Marianne. I appreciate you coming on the show and giving us some information, talking a little bit about fishing and whatever else is going to hit our brains tonight.
Well, thanks. I'm excited to be here, guys. It sounds like we're going to have a very interesting conversation here in the next, I don't know what the time slot is or how long it is, but who knows? We'll we usually go a little longer, right?
So it depends on how in depth it gets, but we try to keep it about an hour.
Okay.
So, first of all, just let everybody know about you. I've come across you several times on social media. I've watched you on TV. But, let everybody know what it is that makes you tick.
Okay. So for the people that are out there that are watching that enjoy competitive angling, regardless of what level you're on, everybody knows there's a drive and it's there. You don't just wake up one morning and decide you're a competitive person. I think that every one of us could agree that you're born with it. And I've always had that. Ever since I was a little girl, my first time on the water catching fish was on Lake Michigan. And I grew up in Charlevoix, Michigan. So right on the Great Lakes. Big water is my thing. I'm all about it. I get very claustrophobic on small bodies of water. I know you guys are out in the West Coast, so I don't really, and am not familiar with a lot of smaller lakes to compare it to. Here in Wisconsin, we have Lake Winnebago. It's approximately 20 miles long and a couple miles wide. So to me, that's a little on the small side. Born and raised that way. So transitioned into some rivers and streams as I got into the high school age. After that, met my first husband and moved up to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, caught my first walleye. I was so excited. It was through the ice, and I actually threw it down the hole and didn't want to tell anybody that I did. I didn't know what I was doing. So the next week went out and bought a quad or four-wheeler. Some people call it different things, and ice shanty, a gas-powered auger, and was just excited to really dive into that part of fishing. That next summer, had a small Lund boat and started doing some grassroots or bar tournaments, the $10 or $30 entry, just the locals. I did that for quite a while and spent time, I think it was about 10 years, progressing on the St. Mary's River. So the St. Mary's River is located between Michigan and Canada, and it's a very diverse body of water. You can troll with lead core, mono, fire line. You can learn to jig. You can be in high current areas and really learn boat control. So you can cover all the trolling, the casting crankbaits, the flip and jigs into the weeds. So I was very fortunate to spend time up there. And most of the time when the tournaments go up to the St. Mary's River, that I've been there, a lot of the other anglers say, "Oh, I hate this place because it's so difficult." And I love it. Maybe because I was on it for so long. So at the end of 2008, I was thinking about taking it to the next level and doing the grassroots team thing in the state of Michigan. And a few of the guys that I knew said, "Don't waste your time. All you're going to do is learn to cheat, because there's so many guys in that level that are cheating, and they're out on the water. They're together in the boat. They're using their phones. You're just going to get pissed." So they said, "You know what? Take it to the top level and go to the Pro Am." I thought, okay, why not? So the very first pro tournament was in Saginaw, Michigan. Of course, one of the bodies of water that I knew. And I went in there confident. I fished this body of water a lot, and I literally got my rear handed to me, which is what happens to most anglers when they take their first leap into the pro side. So I had a lot to learn. Went home, and my husband passed away a week later in a freak accident.
Oh, geez.
So I had a ton of support, owned a business, a construction company at the time, and people in the industry reached out and said, "You got to keep going because this is what you love to do and it's going to get you through this hard time." So I did. I fished the AIM circuit back then. It was a Pro Am. Now it's a team event. And 4 years later, won the Angler of the Year title. My grandfather's the one that got me fishing as a young child, and he had died in 2011. I won the title in 2012 on August 18th, which was his birthday.
Oh, wow.
So everything kind of went full circle. It was kind of cool. And AIM was no longer a Pro-Am after that year, so I transitioned to the National Walleye Tour. I did fish a couple FLWs prior to that as well. And then I had some health issues, COVID hit, and then Head to Head came out during COVID that first year, but they were stuck in the state of Wisconsin. You couldn't travel. Those folks in Michigan, they weren't even allowed to be in a boat. For some reason, you could get COVID on the water, apparently.
That happened here, too.
Still
this
can't
was the other
it
state. It happened here, too. This was the only other state they did that.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, so like they were arresting people at the boat launch here in Michigan. It was nuts. So anyways, so there were a couple head-to-heads here in Wisconsin, and I did one of them on the Fox River, loved the format. Then there was another one coming up on Winnebago, and since the National Walleye Tour was canceled, I called a couple of the guys that I traveled with and said, hey, you need to come up here and do this tournament on Winnebago. So they did, and one of them actually won the event. It was an individual event there, but it was at that time in 2020, but it wasn't the pro side. So then everything was ramping up for 2021. They Head-to-Head announced they were going to have a pro walleye series, only 32 anglers, and I jumped in with both feet. I love the format. I don't believe in boxing fish anymore in tournament atmosphere. And I have spoke up publicly about that for a long time. You know, I'm one of the anglers that made the 100-mile runs, and those fish are not going to live. And you think they're going to make it back 100 miles? I don't know. So Head-to-Head was the right fit for me. The schedule was all over the place from New York to Nebraska. And the first tournament I went to, I did not have my boat. I used my ex-husband's boat, which was an 18-foot Lund. And I actually told everybody, you know, what's the big deal? I'm on the Detroit River. I don't need that big boat. Well, when you're used to putting all your tackle in certain compartments for tournament angling, and that's taken away from you, it was not good. I did a horrible tournament, finished second to last. And I was dealing with some serious spine issues. I've got bone on bone in 6 spots in the lower back and 4 in the upper spine. So not good. And then I got my boat and got ready for the second event, which was on Lake Wisconsin, I think is where we went next. And I had a great tournament, made the grade 8. And lo and behold, I made 4 of the 6 grade 8s, which was wonderful. If you've ever seen me talk on a podcast or read about me, you know that the one thing I hate, the one place I hate to fish is the Mississippi River. So when we went there, I did not exactly have the best attitude. The bite was horrible. It was hot. And that place where you saw me fishing and back in a sunfish hole, I basically put my flag in the ground and said, I'm staying here. And it worked out, and I won the tournament in the one place that I do not like to fish. So
I remember there was like one local, maybe it was a local, it wasn't another head-to-head guy, but there was a local in there, and I was like, he was good with you, right? They kind of let you do your thing. You didn't have anybody infringe on your casting spots.
No, he actually came in there to see what I was doing firsthand, not just on camera. And he pulled up and said, Marianne, we know you're fishing head-to-head. We're going to keep our distance. And they weren't in there very long. So, because I was working quite a bit of the shoreline. And I even I don't know if you remember, I cast out in the middle. That one time I said, well, if they're on this side of the boat, they might as well be on the other and cast. And that was one of I think it was a 4.5 or 5 pounder. So that was a great day and finished up the season. The bite the whole year just seemed to be tough everywhere. So I had a good time. They closed it up and they're no longer doing the professional walleye series, unfortunately. So this year I was going to do one of their events on the Fox River, but I'm in a massive major remodel project at home, and rescheduling subcontractors just didn't work. So I have not fished any events this year.
So what was their reasoning for not doing anymore?
Well, they said something about the sponsors, that not being able to get the sponsors, and because of the cost, and this, because the sponsors weren't buying in, that they weren't going to continue to do it.
Okay, so just a lack of interest from, you know, people that could motivate the tournaments, then basically is what it is.
Yeah, and you know what? We don't know what went on behind closed doors. I mean, how much were they charging the sponsors? What kind of deals were they working? I have absolutely no idea. As a business owner, as a chief operations officer, as a sales manager, and everything I do outside of that and running companies, I can tell you that sometimes you got to take baby steps.
Yeah.
And the more you leap, the harder you're going to fall. So I don't know if that's what they were doing, but they weren't getting the sponsors apparently, which is it's unfortunate.
Do you want me to? I'll speak my mind a little bit on that, because I really enjoyed it. I'm a diehard. I'll watch, and that was the type of stuff I'd love to see other circuits like the NWT. Of course, they got to break out of their. I agree with you 100%. Catch and release is the way to go. So, like for the last 2 years during COVID, our circuit out here is we've got about 6-7 tournaments, and when 2020 kicked up and what happened, our whole season was kind of over, and they shut down fishing for us too for a little bit.
Yeah, they did. June something.
That lasted about, I don't know, a month or two, and everybody was just going nuts. It was stupid. It made no sense. There was no logic behind it, which there's no logic behind a lot of rule making over the last couple of years. But that whole situation, you know, I moved out here to Washington 8-9 years ago for the walleye fishing. I'm originally from North Dakota / Minnesota, Bemidji, Devil's Lake. I used to come out here fishing. I was blown away at the fishery and the lack of people out here doing it. So I moved out here, found a job, moved out here, and I've been here for 9 years now. And so I was pretty bummed out in 2020 when all of our tournaments were being canceled because we couldn't get together. So I'm the last person I would have ever expected to take the reins, but for 2 years, I basically, I ran about, I don't remember how many, 12 to 15 tournaments. I was the tournament director / fishing in them, which is horrible because you can't focus. No. And there's situations where you're just going to be the bad guy consistently when you're the tournament director. But for 2 years, I did it, and there were some really good ideas behind the whole catch and release. I just don't think our technology there's going to be a day where we can wear a button on our shirt that's going to show everything we do. And when that day comes, it'll be a lot easier, but there were some issues here and there, slight ones, but it did work. And the fact that you didn't have to burn $400 in fuel because we were using a format where there was a lot of trust in people, where you could launch wherever you want. You can't start fishing until whatever the number was. And hey, if anybody sees you doing it, you're gone, you're done, you're blacklisted.
Yeah.
And you hope you can get a group of people that are going to adhere to these. You know, there's always going to be a rotten apple no matter where you go. But I think we had a good group. I don't think we had anybody bending the rules. So for 2 years, we basically did that format, and it did work. And a lot of people enjoyed it. The older crowd did not. And I'm old. I'm 48. I'm getting to that point where I'm old. So the younger class had no problems with it, but the older guys, the guys that were in their 50s, 60s, had problems with the technology. But once they learned it, it was fine. There's a learning curve involved. Yeah, exactly. So, but you know, that's expected. But I really personally enjoyed the fact that you didn't have to worry about killing your fish.
Yeah.
You didn't have to burn. You didn't have to run your boat at full throttle and burn and now gas is terribly expensive out here. It's $6 a gallon for premium. So like we had a tournament this weekend. I burned $400 for the fuel. And, you know, if we had that other format where you could just go to where you're going to start and fish, and then you're done at whatever, 3:00.
Yeah.
So there's huge advantage to that. I just don't think we're there technologically, because the one thing I didn't like about it is the fact that if you caught a fat 30-incher, you got credit for the same thing as a fat 30 or a skinny 30-incher. So that was one thing that drove me nuts, because I've seen times where somebody caught a skinny 32-incher and they got credit for a 14-pound fish with the conversion. And then you look at somebody's 27-incher that was obviously probably a 10, 11-pounder. So there was that. I hope there's a day where we can somehow integrate actually weighing the fish, because in my opinion, that's what matters. Because I've seen plenty of skinny long fish and plenty of fat short fish. I think if we can ever get to that point, that's the perfect answer to everything. We're just not there yet. But the head-to-head, the way they had it, you know, you had to have a marshal in the boat, which was good, because then everything, you know, it's up to them to do the proper weigh-in. There were rules bent, and the one thing about head-to-head that kind of drove me nuts is I did see some, I don't know if it was treatment towards certain anglers or not, but there were times where I saw a couple guys got really hosed on rules, and it really, for instance, Max Wilson, what happened to him really irritated me. I don't think that you should ever get to the point where a word that somebody says, yes, words can really hurt people. I understand that, but I grew up thinking sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And you just brush it off. So what happened to Max? And Max is, I've met Max. He's come out here to the Columbia River. I've never met a guy that has more drive or passion for fishing than Max. Like, he has that. Max can't control his passion. Probably most people would agree with that. He spins out a lot, and for the viewer, that's fun to watch.
Yeah.
So it was very frustrating to see what they did to Max. It actually irritated me, and I know a lot of people right then and there that quit watching. And I'll just say it. Period. I was on the fence of not watching. I still watched the rest of it. I loved watching. He was pulling the wire for, what's his name?
Randy Gaines.
Randy Gaines. I loved watching what he did to win that final event in McConaughey. And, you know, and it's like he needs somebody like Randy to coach him on calming down and stuff.
He's
but Max
so
is
young, though. I mean,
right.
It will come to Max. He doesn't mean anything by it. He's certainly not out there to harm anyone at all. And the whole thing behind head-to-head was, and this was talked about, there's going to be villains, there's going to be heroes, and that's what reality TV is all about. And we all knew that going into it, because that is part of the show, for example. And that's what drives viewers. So from what I heard, he was DQ'd because some sponsor called and said, if you don't DQ him, we're pulling out our sponsorship. So whether that's true or not, or a rumor, the guys that I travel with, there was a lot of situations that happened that we would hear about later. And we all looked at each other like, are we oblivious to what's going on here or what? Because we focus on fishing, and we're not the kind of group that hung out with everybody at the end of the night. And yeah, so I didn't know that was even going on until later, and had no idea that he was DQ'd. It is extremely unfortunate. Again, it boils down to, did it all happen? Was there too much running before the walking? Did it happen too fast? Should it have been a local, where you still are an individual event, not a team event, with lower entry fees? And should it have started out slower before it went too big, too quick? I don't have that answer. But I know there were so many viewers, the response and what I got personally, and the impressions that I obtained from one event was more than I would have gotten in the National Walleye Tour in 5 years. And I could have won 2 events in the National Walleye Tour and still wouldn't have got the impressions. And I'm the only woman in the entire circuit. And I still would not have gotten it. Right. Not even close.
I think anytime you put any type of competition head to head, you know, it's not just okay, let's bring the fish in, let's see who weighs the most. I mean, there's more to it than that. And once you get that involved, it's no different than MLF with bass. You know, you get that competition brood and you put that in some sort of format that people can watch. That's interesting.
Yeah. And it's,
you know,
it's hard, Chad, like you said, you're a tournament angler. So you knew that we were struggling and the bite was tough, but you knew what that was like. It's hard to fight the keyboard warriors.
Yeah.
You don't even know who they are. And the stuff that they say online, and they just don't shut up. And there was an analogy put out by one of the media companies about the keyboard warrior and what the guy looks like behind his computer. And, you know, it was a little cartoon. It was hilarious. But there were a lot of people that were pissed off or complaining that they're not catching any fish. And if I were doing this, I would do that and do this. Really, you have no idea. You're not there. So that's always a tough one too. But when you're in a live event, that's how it goes. But I will say one thing that came out of head to head that was probably the best thing is not one person can say that you, me, whoever that fished head to head went on stage and lied about what bait they used, because it was all live. So when it was the Great 8, those last 3 days, there was no hiding anything. We weren't going on stage and giving a line of whatever because we're sponsored by this bait. It was all, you know, uncut video, which I think is pretty awesome.
I agree. That was what got me into it. I wanted to watch Isaac Lockett struggle. I wanted to watch Max blow up.
Right.
I wanted to watch him, you know, because the kid's fun to watch, man. He's he's one of the best fishermen around, period. I mean, he had a big lead. I'm sure he's annoyed and frustrated right now because he had the lead on the Mississippi River. This wasn't the same section, I don't think, that you were fishing. I think this was a further upriver. Maybe?
Yeah.
And he had the day one lead. And I'm sure I think he dropped to 7th or something. I'm sure it's killing him, but he still got 7th place in the NWT. He led it day one. He's already won at least one NWTA. He won the championship on Lake of the Woods. He's won a bunch of AIM events with Isaac.
Yeah, I think it's awesome.
The kid's got it. He gets in his head too much.
I know. He does, but that will change as he grows older and matures. And you know what? Those lessons that he's learning right now, I don't necessarily think that they're so bad, because it will make him become such a better person, an angler, a public speaker, all these things. And it's no different than any of us. Everything that happened when we got kicked to the curb or we were down and got kicked while we were down, it made us all better people. And he's going to go through the same challenges. It's just that we are watching him because he has more of a public profile. So we're seeing those challenges. Right.
And he gets a lot. So when you have success, along with success comes jealousy. And there are tons of guys that are extremely jealous of how good of a walleye fisherman he is. And I see he's done a lot of podcasts, and he always brings that up, that people hate him. And it's not, they don't hate you. Yeah. They're jealous. They're jealous that you can kick their ass every time you put that boat on the water. So, and like you say, he's going to start to realize that as he adds some years to his repertoire. But the guy has more drive than anybody I've seen on the NWT, other than I've seen John Hoyer out there sun up till sundown. I fished a couple NWTs myself, and there are only a couple guys that I see out there when the sun's coming up and the sun's coming down. It's like John Hoyer, Max Wilson. There's a few other guys, Dylan Nussbaum. There's a few guys, and they're younger guys, because that's one question I have for you. I'm going to completely go off. How hard was it to fish 5 days in a row? Because 2 days is is horrible. How bad, how tough was it with a couple days pre-fishing and then to fish 5 days with a camera on you? That had to be horrible. I mean, as far as energy factor goes.
So first of all, I want to back up to the practice, the allowed practice time. I loved that. You could only practice on all day Friday, and it was sun up, sundown hours, all day Saturday, sun up, sundown. And if you were on the water, you better be held steady at the launch until that sunrise time on your phone. Because if you got caught, you were out. And then we had the meeting on Sunday night. So I think that was one other thing that they really did well, because you want to talk about deciphering who's a good angler and who's not. If you and I, Chad, are fishing against each other and I don't have a job and I spend a month on a body of water, it doesn't mean I'm going to win the tournament, but it means I have a lot more time than you do. And you're working 5-6 days a week. You're whatever you do, you roll in and you can only practice for the 5 days before the National Walleye Tour. There's a big difference. So it really leveled the playing field. And that was huge. And some people didn't like that. They thought it wasn't fair. Well, why isn't it fair? I mean, if you wanted to be in this league, big boy league, then put your big boy pants on and get your rear out there and do it. What's the problem? I mean, quit your whining. So, sorry.
That's great.
So then the 5 days, that was tough. It was tougher when it was really hot. I'm sure you saw in Mille Lacs, Joey Okada was really struggling with some heat stroke. I had the bimini top up. I really don't care what anyone says, how the boat looks. Health is a very important thing, and heat stroke kills more people than hurricanes and tornadoes combined. So I pound electrolytes. I wound up giving some of the other guys some electrolyte powder, mixing up some stuff from them. But the camera, to answer your question, never bothered me one bit. Not at all. And maybe it's because I've been around it for a long time, so it doesn't. But the grind of the tough bite, thank God it was done at 1 o'clock, not 3 o'clock. That was the 5 hours. That wasn't too bad, because even on the real hot days, that's when it really starts getting hot. But if you have to go from 1 to 3, that extra 2 hours, oh my God.
Right.
So yeah, the 5 days, it was definitely not for the lighthearted. There's no doubt. But did I like it in the end, the long run? Loved it.
Right.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt about it as far as heat goes. I mean, I don't know what temperatures you guys were running during that tournament, but you know, when we were fishing up there at the Kettle River for our tournament last year, we were having temperatures that were 115, 119. And that was only for 3 days.
Yeah, we were only about 105. So, but that's still hot.
The good thing about the only good thing about the Columbia River starts basically in Canada, Lake Roosevelt. That water I have never seen that water higher than 65. So you have a little bit of relief there with the hat dips and such. But it's still brutal. But have you been out here, by the way?
I have not. No. So I mean, I've fished Washington, but I fish out in Orcas Islands, fish for lingcod, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we're not interested in talking about that. The Columbia River is, I don't know how I can't compare it. And I haven't fished a ton of waters. I've never fished the Mississippi River, but the Columbia River it sounds like it. But the Columbia River is, Lonnie might know, it's like 300 some miles maybe more than that from Canada. Yeah, maybe it's 550 or something from Canada all the way. There's a lot of turns all the way to Oregon, follows the border, Washington, Oregon, dumps out in the river. And for the first 5 years that I lived here, I never ventured further. I'm at the start of the Columbia River in an area called Rufus Woods, the Grand Coulee Dam. And I didn't even venture downriver at all until I'd been here a while. But the fishery out here, it's still great, but comparing it to the Midwest, like the Great Lakes, where you guys can go out and catch a lot of them 8 to 10 pound fish. Yeah, we can still get them nice fish, but now it's declining a little bit, I guess. But our big fish are more in that 15 to 18 pound. That's considered a big fish out here. And it's it's fairly consistent to see if you fish a lot, to see a few 15 to 18 pounders a year. It's just time on the water more than anything. But I have seen those numbers decline a little bit. They took the limits off of walleye out here in 14, I think it was. So the Columbia River, they can kill everything if they want. And we've went through a few years of people getting into walleye fishing, especially during COVID, and specifically the night fishing. And I'm sure you know, night fishing is to a degree very simple at times. And so people that were just getting into walleye fishing out here, not realizing how rare a 15-pound or 12-pound fish is, we're either mounting them or eating them. So the numbers have definitely dropped. And so we went through a cycle the last few years of a lot of salmon guides going into walleye with that mentality of who cares, let's kill it. And Washington State has no restock, they have nothing. So it's 100% politics with the dams and the salmon. And it's one of those deals where nobody seems to have any say in it. Whether there's statistics proven otherwise, they won't look at it. But bottom line, they did lift the limits, so there are no limits on the walleye in the Columbia River anymore. Extremely frustrating. Terrible. And so we've watched it. I've watched it go from insane to where you could literally expect to catch a 18, 19 pounder if you put 3-4 days in a row in. You could honestly expect that could possibly happen, to where now we're at the point where it's kind of dropped down to that 15-pound mark. It's just too many of them top of the pyramid fish have been removed, and hopefully enough people out here have been educated now that, hey, if we're not putting any money into restocking them, you got to have a little restraint. And that also goes for our tournament circuit. I mean, our tournament circuit, we until it gets hot, it's not a problem, but we have one tournament in July that I would love to see to go in some format, catch and release, because just like you said, a lot of guys are running 30, 40, 50 miles, and chances of having a flat calm day are very rare, and those fish don't survive. And I've spent 5-10 minutes before trying to get these big fish to go down from other anglers that release them and they're not ready. So I completely agree with you on that, where I want to see us go to all catch and release. We're just not there yet. We had the 2 years of testing it out, and it was kind of a 50-50 split on the people that liked it and the people that didn't.
What were you using? Were you using the Donkey app?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
And Chad, just to interject on that real quick, I think if it was done, because the process of the way we did it was good, but there was too much put on you as one person to try and run a tournament. If you had enough of a committee or something that was willing to take that on,
right,
and you could do it that way, I think that would go a long ways as far as promoting that.
Right. That was my fault. That was the stubbornness that I figured I can do it all myself, and I could sit there for an hour after the tournament and judge fish. And then I constantly had to deal with people that didn't agree with my judgment. And I can promise you, I was better at judging these fish than anybody, and I was consistent. But you still had the people that would, and it just made it worse for the guy that's trying to run the event. And that's why I was like, all right, I'm done with this. And now we're through all that, and we're back to our normal circuit. And the guys that run our circuit, they're doing a great job. I would just suggest to them that when we get to these hot, for the scheduling for future events, so when we get to these really hot times of the year where it can be 110 plus for a couple of days, that, it's sad to see all these dead fish floating after the tournament when we're trying to promote catch and release and
conservation. But you're from the Dakotas, so isn't it one of the states, I don't know if it's north or south, they don't allow tournaments in July?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, the reason the NWT is not going back to North Dakota is the Fish and Game took that minimum percentage fee, where it went from taking, I think it was about 5,000 to 8,000 per tournament to 30, and that all comes out of the anglers' prize pool. And when guys like me are driving from here, and hoping to at least cash a check, and
Yeah.
to cover the $5,000 that we're spending out of our pocket to go fish a tournament. That was frustrating because, man, I fished the Skakawea NWT a couple years ago. I fished the Devil's Lake one, and then this year I fished Oahe or Chamberlain. So because they're the closest ones for me.
Sure.
And you got to have an incentive for the anglers, and it's frustrating that North Dakota has done what they've done, because I highly doubt NWT is going to go back there.
No.
At this point. So, but I love Oahe. I mean, this is my first time there. We had horrible weather this year, but I will certainly go back there next year if they go back there.
Well, the other thing with the transition period, we'll kind of say that with this, these apps like the Donkey app that people are using, and for AIM, they call it catch, record, release. Some are catch, photo, release. And I don't know if that's a trademark thing or whatever it is. Sometimes I feel like, okay, what is the age cutoff where these guys that aren't going to do it because they don't understand it, they want to bring fish in and they're pissed off? That's fine. But if we don't start these baby steps with all the anglers, eventually the live bait situation is going to sneak up on us next. And you can't transport these minnows to this. You can't transport them to this time. We used to be able to buy minnows in any state and drive them to whatever state. It didn't matter, or to Canada or wherever. You can't do that anymore. And it's going to continue to get worse. And the other thing is, everyone loves the walleye industry, but they're not interested in R&D. They don't want to have any new baits come out, because the more crawlers everybody buys, the less advancements in the fishing. I mean, look at the stuff that went on with head to head. I was casting and pausing for the Mississippi River. Max and Isaac were doing artificial bait with a slip bobber on Mille Lacs and catching fish. So you had no choice but to think outside of the box. And I don't know why Berkeley's not pushing this, or the other. It blows my mind that Bass Pro Shop and Cabela's, who make their own baits, and some people say they have knockoffs. I don't really care, whatever. Why aren't they own the circuit? Why are they not pushing for this? Because it's only going to drive sales. It does not make any sense to me.
And I completely agree. When I moved out here to Washington, we can't use live bait here other than night crawlers, but leeches were allowed for about a year or two after I moved out. And then they banned those. And I remember how mad I was, because I loved slip bobber and leeches. But I'll say this, ever since I quit fishing live bait, I have become better at fishing. 100%.
Absolutely.
There's no question. Like the way I fished 10 years ago before I moved out here into a state that doesn't allow live bait, the way I fished 10 years ago, I would beat, if I fished against myself, I would, today's Chad would beat 10 years ago 9 times out of 10, because I've turned into, not always, but I've turned into a casting / crankbait, where I used to just pull Lindy rigs and live bait, red tails around on Bemidji. And it always doesn't work. I mean, I think the Mississippi River, I think the guys that won it were using willow cats. But I'm sure there were plenty of guys that were right up there with those guys that weren't doing that. So live bait is kind of, like I say, once you get over the fact that you can't use it anymore, you're going to get better at fishing for walleye. 100%.
And that was another thing that drove people nuts about the head-to-head. How come you can't use live bait? Well, you know what? Again, are you a good angler, or do you go out and throw a crawler out? I mean, if you want to separate yourself, then get out there and do it. And for one industry where there's a whole lot of egomaniacs, it just surprises me that, when it comes down to it, there's a lot of guys that will not go without live bait.
Yeah, but don't you think that's what they just throw it out there? It's the easy button.
It is the easy button. One of the other things that we could not do in head-to-head that I absolutely loved, and it drove a few people nuts, we could not get information from locals or guides or anybody. And anything that we got, so let's say I walk into the bait shop and they're like, oh, Marianne, I just came off the river and I'm using this bait and I'm throwing this or I'm doing this and here's my coordinates. And they put the phone. I literally had to take that information and text the tournament director immediately, and he spit it out to all 32 anglers. So everybody had the exact same info. And that drove people nuts, that we weren't allowed to get local information. But I will tell you that all the guys that fished, they all were very good about that. And when we would get to a location, because you couldn't go there 30 days prior to either. So nobody's going for a month. You can't get any information 30 days. But as it got closer, you would not believe how many text messages we were getting from the tournament director. Isaac heard this, or Max was told this, or, Corey Heiser got this information. So that was pretty awesome. Again, level playing field.
Yeah, I remember the first NWT I ever fished in 18. That was Devil's Lake. The tournament director, he actually, apparently some guys had been on the water during the day communicating, and he was vocally saying, if you guys are caught doing that, you're done. And these were some big name guys. Mm-hmm. And some of the other guys I'm like, who are they talking about? And once they told me, I'm like, really? Wow. I was kind of surprised. And at the same time, I was pissed. I'm like, well, that sucks, because I just paid $2,000 to enter this tournament, and I drove all the way out here, and I'm basically fishing against a team. I hated that, but I also looked at it. This is the way I looked at it. Well, if I can find fish on my own, those guys can go ahead and share those fish, and I'm on my own fish, and I'll feel better because I found my own fish. I didn't have anybody tell me to try this area, but having a level playing field would be nice. And that happens in every tournament circuit, whether it's your local bar league.
We could still communicate with each other. We could share baits on the water with only if it was one of the 32. We could talk amongst the 32, but we couldn't get any outside information from anybody.
So were there actually, here's a question for you. Was there anybody that was against that, and they were just like, nope, I will fish on my own 100% and not talk to anybody else?
No, they weren't like that, but there were a couple guys that were upset because they didn't want there to be all the small groups. They didn't feel like it was fair because they didn't have a small group.
And I agree with them. Yeah.
Yep. So there was some boisterous people about that. I didn't blame them either. However, I do have to say, I traveled with a couple guys, but when it came to tournament day, we're not fishing the same fish. We're still doing our own thing. But the difference was the group that I traveled with, we didn't share money. And I think that is the key point right there. And we never have ever. So it's one for all and all for one. So when somebody does good, we're truly happy for them. You're not, pissed off because let's say I'm the one that's bringing in the checks and someone else isn't. So that was never an issue at all with us, which was nice.
Right.
And I fished National Walleye Tour and AIM and, some FLWs. And I remember that feeling like you had when I found out the person that won the tournament actually got the information the night before from a guide. Never went there at all. You didn't even know, just took a chance and then won the tournament. And so I struggled with that years ago too, saying, I didn't care that they won. It was that they were tall, puffy chest, like they're so awesome. And I'm such a great angler. Because why?
Oh my God, I would love to know who you're talking about. But
because somebody told you where to go fish, now you're like a great angler. I mean, so that was what I had a tough time with.
I've heard similar stories. I'm not sure if maybe we're thinking of the same individual, but yeah, I mean, how can you be proud of yourself?
Right. Like, at least be humble about your win, at least like a tiny bit.
Right. And if somebody's if somebody says, go to this GPS location, and even if they don't tell you how to catch them, correct, a good angler can figure that out. So,
and I always wondered why at no point during the weigh-in did they ever stand up on stage and say, you know what, I really need to give my hat off to this guy or gal. I came here to practice. I was struggling and they helped me out, and I would not be here if it weren't for them. I never heard that come out of their mouth. Not once. Yep. So I did. Well, I struggled with that a little bit. That's why I think I liked head-to-head. I went into it knowing that it didn't matter if I was going to get my butt kicked. I knew the artificial only. I was going to learn more. There was a level playing field, and I was going in having a good time, and I had a great attitude. And I think that has a lot to do with the success I had.
So moving away from that though, real quick, because Chad, you were hitting on the Columbia River, and when I was talking to Marianne before, you know, we were setting this up, and she had asked me the question, what the heck's going on with the walleye fishing out there? So I want to get an opinion from somebody that's away from this, what you see, and, you know, your take on that.
You want my take or Chad's?
Yours.
Oh, so, well, I've been hearing, and I asked you when we talked, Lonnie, that they're basically just slaughtering the walleyes out there. And the Columbia River had come up multiple times when all 32 of us anglers and head-to-head were trying to pick a destination. And that was a major concern with the fact that the walleye fishing 10 years ago was unbelievable out there. And you had all these, like Chad said, 15, 18 pounders, but they were hard to come by because exactly what you said, that they're opening it up. I think it is so incredibly sad that they are doing this and destroying the fishery like this with no limits, no size limits. There's obviously no possession limit. And I'm not surprised to hear Chad say that the salmon guys are transitioning into walleye, especially with no quotas on them at all. They're all about, you know, not all of them. There's some really great guides out there, but they just want to fill the box pretty much. So it's going to destroy the fishery eventually. I think it will happen quicker than you think. And all because of the salmon. And when Lonnie, when you and I talked about it, I also had mentioned how Mother Nature goes full circle.
Yep.
And that happened here on Green Bay. They built a man-made, it's not really a wall. It comes out with multiple fingers, and it changed the current of the bay. And it was there years ago, so they replaced it. But when they did that, the walleye that used to be in certain areas in the spring were no longer there. We couldn't catch them. There wasn't a single fish. Well, now it's been 8 years or so, and now those fish are showing back up there again in the areas that I haven't been able to catch them or haven't seen anything on my graph for a long time. So I do believe that this is something that happens everywhere. Hopefully Mother Nature will help replenish. Same thing with our perch here. The perch, there was no limit for a long time, or maybe it was 50 and on the bay, and guys were double dipping. 50 in the morning, go and have lunch, you know, go out, get 50 more, and they almost wiped it out. I was out last week on the bay trolling with flicker minnows, and you would not believe the perch that I was catching. I put them on the ruler 12 inches and took a picture. Just big fat footballs. So it's coming back. Again, Mother Nature is winning. So hopefully you guys will have the same thing that happens out there, and maybe you'll get somebody in office that is an angler or an avid outdoors person that
we could only wish.
Maybe one of you should run.
Yeah, no. I'd be assassinated in 2 weeks.
And the thing about it, you know, like we were talking about when we talked before, is it is cyclic. It doesn't matter really what species it is. Now, obviously, you know, not us, but certain people having a hand in maybe taking more than they should, or not put back the ones that are breeders or things like that. But even if you look at, like you were talking, perch, it seems to be about every 7-8 years here, you get that cycle. You get a bunch of perch, and then all of a sudden the walleye explode behind it. The perch fall off, you get bigger size fish, just not the numbers. And it just kind of seems to go in that, you know, just for me, because, you know, I've been fishing these waters, since I was 5. And just to see all that transition, and you see it about every 7-8 years. You'll see things turn around. Now, the
Yeah.
only disadvantage to that is the fact that, we don't have a stocking program. They tried and failed. So everything that we have here is all natural. Well, if we're going to take those out, we're not going to have those.
And this is, I don't know, Melanie, if you'd heard about this, but I think there's been attempts to run excessive amounts of water in the river while the walleye are spawning over the last couple of years to try to flush them out and lower the numbers. I can't speak whether that's true or not, but I have heard that from a few guys, and I've witnessed it, like certain times of the year when the walleye are probably spawning, where all of a sudden they're pushing maximum amounts of water, which puts high nitrogen in the water because of the spillways. That's the result of water hitting water, is you produce nitrogen, and you can get too much and it'll kill fish. So they're certainly not trying to enhance it. And we could talk for another hour if I start going on this, but the frustrating part is, like you say, that we don't have anything other than natural reproduction. And the walleye fishing has definitely become more popular out here in the last 5 years, since, I've been out here 8 years, but, especially in the last 2-3 years, it's definitely. So there was an area in the Tri-Cities where I used to go trolling at night. I'd go probably once a month on a full moon weekend and not see a boat. I went last year, maybe it was 2 years ago. Yeah, it was start of COVID. And I went out there. I got there after work about 9 o'clock at night, launched, perfect night. And I get out to the area I wanted to fish. I counted 50 boats.
Wow.
At 10 o'clock at night. And right then and there, I said, oh, man, these guys are just keeping everything. I mean, because they can, So we actually started a catch and release thing a couple years ago, where Big Fish every month was, just basically trying to educate people. Like, look, if you're having fun doing this, you got to restrain yourself, because it's not going to magically reappear every year.
No.
And hopefully some people did understand that, because going out at night, yeah, it's fun, but you have to respect the fishery, and you have to put some of them big fish back. And I'll say this, and Marianne, I guarantee you've ran into this before, because you fished for a long time. The same fish that you caught in 2015 may be at the exact same spot you caught it in 2016, 2017. That exact fish. And until people understand that they are like big deer, they go back to their certain haunts. Matter of fact, last tournament, I think Max caught the same fish. Maybe it was one he caught pre-fishing, or it was something like day one.
It's the one he broke off, wasn't it?
Exactly. And he caught it again in the tournament.
Yeah.
I don't know if people think that we're joking about this, but I've personally caught a fish 2 times myself, and then a buddy one of the other times, in a span of 7 years, and it was 100% the same fish. It had a big black streak on it. It went from a 12 to a 15 to an 18 pounder.
Yeah.
And we had pictures of that same fish, and we caught it on the same flooded brush pile every time. So if you catch a 15 pounder, why wouldn't you put it back, or a 12 pounder, and say, man, I'm going to document this date, the time, the water temperature, and next year I'm going to come back and see if I can catch it again. There's a very good chance you're going to catch it again. Throw it back.
It is so sad. And, I will say I give the DNR a little credit. Not necessarily, I don't know if they've done it. I haven't heard any stories here in Wisconsin, but I did just hear a story about 2 weeks ago about a group of guys that went over to Ohio to fish Lake Erie. And they, of course, were violating. They were double dipping. They were going out in the morning. They were coming in. They were using different boat launches, from what I heard. And the DNR busted them. They knew exactly how many walleyes they had in their freezer. They took all their fish. They had to go to court, and they lost their fishing and hunting privileges, from what I heard, for 1 year in all of the lower 48 states. So good.
Well,
yeah, good.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
What the hell are you thinking? This is absolutely absurd. You really need that many walleyes. Come on. and drive back to your home state. I don't understand it, but I do. And I've talked to some Knights of Columbus groups in my past, and I've had small groups of, gentlemen in the room, and they say from these smaller lakes around here, you know what, we don't understand why there's no fish in our lake. And I look at all of them and say, it's because of you. And they, what? I said, well, how many of you raise your hand if you went out with your grandfathers and you caught fish and brought them in and then went back out, had lunch, and did it again? How many times did you grow up doing that? Well, yeah. Well, you're the reason. So, and they're shocked to think that they are actually at fault for this, but they indeed are.
Well, and that's the thing, is the fact that you can't, there's certain groups that you cannot say police yourself, because it's just not going to happen.
No.
And the sad part about it is the fact that, so that means you have to put some sort of policy in place that's going to say, well, this is all you can keep, because you have to protect against the human nature.
Yeah. And we have a possession limit here in Wisconsin and I know Ohio does not. So you can go catch your daily limit in Ohio on Lake Erie, but you can continue to do that and stack your freezer. In Wisconsin, you're allowed 5 fish, but only 5 in your possession as well. And until those are consumed, you can't go out and get 5 more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to make things a little lighter situation, when you first started talking about dropping things in the hole when you first caught your walleye, the first one you caught, well, I got a good story. So I was up ice fishing in a place where there wasn't any, well, shouldn't say there wasn't any service. Where I was at, there wasn't any service. And so I'm fishing along, game warden's coming out, and he's trying to check everybody for licenses, right? So I've got my box of tackle where I've got my wallet. So I go to reach in to grab my wallet out, and the key fob was sitting right there. And I kid you not, that thing could have not have, it didn't bounce, didn't do nothing, right down the hole.
Nice.
I'm in 50 feet of water.
Oh,
I've got no service.
Oh.
And I'm about, let's say 3.5 hours away from home.
Oh no. What did you do?
So I had to have the warden take me up to where I could get service, call the wife, which it's her car. It was her Jeep. It was only like a year old.
Oh.
I'm like, hey, this happened. Any chance you could run up the extra fob?
You were 3.5 hours?
Oh yeah. 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 So
you can't even get in the car to get warm.
Thank goodness. Well, luckily he took me back to where I was staying.
Oh, okay.
So I was able to get back there. But thank God I have a good wife.
Yes, no doubt.
Yeah, she brought it up anyway. Just
I thought you were gonna have I thought you were gonna actually hook it with a lure or something. I thought.
Well, get this. I took the camera. I put the camera down there. I could see it, but I could not hook that stupid thing to save my ass.
Oh.
I tried for hours. Trust me. The last thing I wanted to do was make that phone call.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's embarrassing, but I'm not afraid to say it.
Oh, yeah. That's okay. It happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
Well, if I want to say to Marianne, if you ever need to come out here, if you want a quick vacation, I know I'm pretty sure you're good friends with Ted Takasaki too. I mean, I've seen some videos with you and him. He's a Lund guy. Yeah.
So Ted and I were both at the Lund photo shoot about a week ago. So I had some pictures up with him and I in one of the, not showing the boat, of course, but we were in one of the newer boats for the photo shoot. So, yeah.
I got a story for me and this is somewhat, I don't know, it's funny more than anything, but Tommy Scarless. So my first NWT, I'm nervous as hell because I'm all around all these big names I've been watching, and I pull up to Devil's Lake, and I actually had I was at the Mercury trailers talking to a couple of the guys there, and I had a Tabor's Bait shirt, which is Bemidji, Minnesota. They're no longer there, and I saw Tommy Scarless, and obviously I knew who he was, and he knew Tabor's Bait, so he came over to me, put his hand out, and he said, "Hi, my name is Ted Takasaki. Oh, nice to meet you." And to this day, I even told Ted, I told him that story. I'm like, where did that come from? but Tommy Scarless introduced himself as Ted Takasaki to me, and he
funny.
was super nice. And unfortunately, he then he had all them health issues, and it was sad to see. And since then, I've heard a lot of stories about Tommy Scarless. Like, he on the water, like, it sounds like he was just a head down, bad son of a bitch when it came to fishing, and you stayed out of his way. I've heard a lot of people say that you don't mess with him when he's fishing.
I never felt that way about Tommy at all, and he was a very good friend of mine too.
Right, he was super nice to me. So I'm just wondering if a switch goes off on some people like that, where they zone, they just tune everybody else out, and people might think they're being a jerk, but they're actually just so focused on what they're doing that they have no interest in talking to you when you're going by them. Like, hey, how you doing, Tommy? And he's just doesn't say nothing. I'm kind of the same way, where I just kind of, people might think that of me, where I just kind of zone out, where I'm not interested because I'm trying to focus.
That's what I do too. Yeah. But
if you and Ted ever need to come out, you're actually the same boat that you have, a 2175. So if you guys ever want to come out here, and I can definitely point you in the direction, the time of the year that you want to go, if you want to try to catch one of these giant fish that are still out here. And
when's the best time of year to come?
I would say mid-February, and then you got to hit the weather properly with try to find the week before a full moon, typically, I would say, but you got to find some calmer days to do the night fishing. And what I'm saying is, you have to go night fishing if you really want to have your percentages go up for seeing that true majestic 15 plus fish. You need to go at night. I mean, I have caught my biggest one did come right before dark, but I've caught so many more big fish after dark that you're just playing your percentages is all you're doing. When you want to take a 3-4 day vacation, a trip, if you want to up your percentages, and I know you want to go out and cast during the day and try to find that elusive bite, but honestly, your best chances are at night. You just have to.
Live bait?
What's that?
No live bait. Oh yeah, you said you can't.
No. Okay. No. At nighttime, you can cast big swim baits at night. Okay. That's not. I've done it, but you're basically pulling crankbaits at night. Daytime, it's a different story. It's tough to, that time of the year to catch crankbait fish. It can happen, obviously, but nighttime, if you have to kind of switch over into that vampire mode where you sleep until noon,
right,
1 o'clock,
and
you go out at 3-4 o'clock and you fish all night. And the older we get, the tougher that is to do, but it honestly is your percentages do go up. So if you guys ever want to come out here, just let Lonnie or myself know, and whether you come out here on your own.
That sounds like fun.
It truly is. As far as big fish, there is no place better, but you're not going to catch numbers like on Erie.
Yeah, but that's
it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
but you have the shot. I know a few guys. Jason Shakura came out last year. John Hoyer came out last year. And luckily they didn't get to experience a 15-pounder on their first trip, because you got to earn that. Mm-hmm. You do have to earn it. My cousin came out here from North Dakota one year, and it's not that I felt bad for him, but he was so gung-ho, he wanted to go that night, and it was blizzard, snow, wind. I'm like, all right, and he caught it. He caught his 15-pounder within an hour.
Wow.
So it does happen where somebody will get lucky like that, but I like to see people earn their stripes. Max is definitely, he's been out here, I think, for 3 or 4 years now. Him and another guy, Jake Hammer, they come out here, and those guys put the hours in, and they are due for a true giant. So I prefer to see people put their time in, but if you guys want to come out here, I will definitely lead you to the light, and it'll be up to you to put the hook in the mouth. But but in return, I've never been to Green Bay or in the Midwest. So if any of us, Lonnie or myself, ever go out that way, and I do want to go out there at some point, it's such a big body of water that we'd probably need a little hand holding and pointing in the right direction ourselves. So
hey, it's not too late to sign up for the NWT. I know they're coming here to Green Bay.
Yeah, well, I can't do it this year. I burned my vacation.
Stuff is one and done.
I burned my vacation for this year. So if they, next year is definitely an opportunity. If that's the closest one next year, I'll probably be coming.
Yeah, that would be awesome. You're always welcome. Give me a call. I can jump in your boat and give you some pointers, do some stuff on the map, show you where to go, where to start, depending on what time of year. But it seems like they come here every single year.
Yeah. Right. So if that's the closest one, which, I've heard some talk about and some of the bigger names are starting to talk about Fort Peck.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
And man, I've never been there, but I don't care. I mean,
I love going to places that I've never been,
right?
Or I'm not a strong angler, because it takes me out of my box, and I always do better. Always.
Well, let's hope that H2H revives itself, because I was pretty excited to see some of the events you guys were gonna do this year, and that's exactly the thing, is I like to see new bodies of water. Like McConaughey, I'd never even heard of Lake McConaughey last year, and it was fun to watch you guys out there. So I'm hoping that they can rebound and learn from their mistakes. I'm sure they did make some mistakes, and because I really did enjoy it.
Somebody else is going to come along and do it.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, well, I appreciate you joining us, Marianne. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun talking to you guys. I appreciate you having me on tonight.
Yeah, hopefully it won't be the last time.
Yeah, anytime, give me a call.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.